Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we are taking a look at the brand new ZT that everyone has been so excited about. But before we dig into this box, I want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you guys by Blade Ops. Be sure to look them up for all of your knife and EDC needs, as well as this knife below. It is currently in stock, link below. And there's also another restock they just did of this guy right here. This is the SOS OTF. I did a review of this earlier this year, and for $100, this is the best OTF I've ever handled. It is absolutely phenomenal. Not quite as long. It's more about the size of a Microtech UTX 85, so we're looking at like a 3-inch blade. Super buttery smooth action. Absolutely excellent OTF. Does have D2 steel, but it has a razor sharp edge, and it feels very good in the hand, and the action overall, fit and finish on this, really, really good. For $100, it is an OTF you really should check out, especially if you're one of those OTF connoisseurs out there. They're back in stock with, I believe, 3 different blade shapes. Those will also be linked below. But now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this review, the ZT. Now, I've only had it for almost 2 full days, so keep that in mind. But I got some things to say about it. And it's actually not in the box. It's right here in all its glory, the ZT-0545. And I've got to say, from a pure design standpoint, this is the best ZT I've seen in a while. Everything that you've heard about it in terms of weight is very true. But before we get to talking too much more about this, let's take a look at some overall specs on this knife right here. We have an overall length coming in at 7.5 inches with a blade length of 3.2 inches and a blade thickness at a rather thin 90 thousandths blade stock. So pretty thin blade there. You usually see it closer to 120 thousandths. Blade material, we all love to see it. CPM MagnaCut. And now I also want to note the Rockwell on this is, or the HRC, is 61 to 63. Now, I know everyone says it should be at 63 to 64, but also keep in mind, vast majority of the manufacturers out there are doing like that 60 to 62 range. So 61 to 63, maybe it's not the best out there, but it's better than a lot of its competition. So I think that's pretty important to note. Blade style of kind of like a modified clip point, I feel like. There's a clip here, but it's a little rounded, so we're going to go modified clip point. Regardless, a really good looking blade. Full flat grind, a handle length coming in at 4.3 inches with a handle thickness at a nice and thin 371 thousandths. Handle material, as you can see, and what is kind of common with the more high-end ZTs, carbon fiber and titanium, looking pretty darn good. A user of a right or left hand deep carry clip, right or left hand tip up deep carry clip. We'll talk more about this clip when we get to the handle portion because I really like the way they designed that clip. We have a weight at a crazy light 2 ounces for a 7.5-inch knife. 2 ounces is about as good as you can get, and I am a huge fan of the way this knife carries. Price coming in at $272. So yeah, $272. You know, I've seen better, but I've seen a lot worse. Benchmade. Don't have huge issues at $272. If I didn't have another issue with the knife, which we'll talk about later in the review, unfortunately. But let's take a look at some size comparisons and get that out of the way and see how it stacks up with the Hogue Deca. Hogue Deca is actually an excellent size comparison knife for it, as is the ProTech Malibu. 3 nice American-made EDCs here. And as you can see, it's pretty much right in that length realm of the ProTech Malibu and the Hogue Deca. So there's that. I think that's all we need for size comparison today because I have a lot to say about this knife and I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. So let's get into this and take a look at the blade first. The blade is actually the most simple part of this knife, and it's simple in a freaking great way. It's just a very clean clip point. Like, I really, really like it. It's got a pretty nice edge, 27 thousandths behind the edge. So I wouldn't call it like, a razor or super, super slicey, but it's efficient for EDC. It works fine. The behind the edge reading isn't always that important either. Keep in mind the thinner stock, the full flat grind, that all equates to, proper cutting geometry if you're going to try, if you want a slicey blade. So, pretty good makeup. I did find the edge to be a little rough in terms like it could maybe use a strapping, I guess is the best way to put it, but not too bad, not too bad. And that's really it for the blade. You got jimping up here, which is nice. Jimping from ZT has always been pretty good in my opinion. And you have the mark back here, which tells you that is an in-house design from ZT. And like I said before, I'm really, really digging this design. I really like it. There's nothing about the design I don't like. I'm a fan. Going into the handle, I really like the bronze pivot collar here. Or not pivot collar, the bronze pivot. It's kind of like a nice, like, antique bronze. Like, it's a really, really nice shade of bronze, kind of a darker, and it goes really well with carbon fiber. Carbon fiber from ZT is always pretty nice, and that's no exception here. I consider this to be pretty top-notch carbon fiber. No issue there. Back here on the clip, let's look at this clip, because as you can see, it is like true ultimate deep carry. And what's really cool about this clip, let me grab a flashlight here real quick, and we are going to take a look at something. There we go. And as you can see in here, the way the clip is set in, there's only one screw. There's not a screw there. You don't need a screw. And the screw actually is the pivot. I can't talk today. One of the back spacers is actually holding the screw in. So it's milled on this side for the clip, and then you can also reverse it to the other side, and it screws in the same way. So that's a really, really nice design. I like that a whole lot. And what's really important is that there is no wiggle. This is a very, very stiff clip. It's not going to move around on you, which is really, really annoying to me. That's a really big pet peeve. If I have a wobbly clip, I can't stand that. And that is not an issue here. So that's really nice to report. On the lock bar side, you have this milled pocket, which is actually extremely appreciated by me for a not so good reason. We'll talk more about that in a second, but I am so happy that's there. That literally saves the knife in a way for me. But everything else on this side is looking pretty good. You got like a really heavy stone wash, all the milling and whatnot. And yeah, it's just a really nice knife from both sides in terms of aesthetics and overall design. Really good job there. The problem is when you get into the action, because as you can, it happened, see? And that's why. So I thought I actually had my fingers placed right, and I didn't think that was going to be an issue for this one. But the issue with this knife is the lock bar pressure and the tension. If you get, just a smidgen, like so when you hold this knife, you're holding it like this, or you need to be holding it like this. But if you get like just an ounce of pressure, like if my nail pushes down on this lock bar at all, and I mean at all, it's just not opening, like, for the life of me. Like, I am pressing so hard right now, and I just have, a small amount of my finger on it, and that's how hard I'm pressing. Like, it is rough. It is very, very rough. So, keep in mind, this is just one knife. I don't know if that's an issue with all of them. And I totally understand the fact that, like, I'm all about, like, being aware and keeping your finger off the lock bar. I understand that's something that should be known throughout the community or throughout any type of, true knife person. You just know better than to put too much pressure on the lock bar. But this is my thing with that. Like, I get that, and I'm not arguing that. But the design needs to be taken into consideration. Like, if they know that the lock bar is that sensitive and there's that much pressure, just the littlest pressure can ruin the action on the knife, they got to do something to fix that. I honestly think that's partly why they put this pocket here, because I can, like, keep my finger all the way in this pocket and then go to flip it, and it flips out fine then. Like if you're not putting any pressure on the lock bar, the action's good. The problem, the big problem, is there's not really enough space back here to accommodate that being easy for the user. So what I mean by that is when I just pull this out of my pocket and I go to open it, I have to really think and be careful and move my finger out of the way to make sure that it's not going on the lock bar. That's a problem. That's a big problem for me because nowadays you have knives like, I mean, hell, this is $120 beg knives, and it has, a lock bar, and I can put my finger on that and this flips out just fine. And I can do it with so many other knives that it really bothers me that this is that big of a problem, because for $272, it shouldn't be. That's where I'm really hung up on this knife, because you guys, I'm a ZT fan. Like back in the day, I was a fanboy, and I still am. I still like ZT. I still have these knives for a reason, because I love them. I think they're two of the best knives in my collection. But these don't have any issues. They don't have any issues at all. They're great designs. Don't get me wrong. This is a great design. Love this design. I couldn't be happier with the design. I'm just a little extra pissed off that there's that issue with the lock bar. And it's really hard to look past when you have to think about it that hard to deploy it. Especially like me, like I have kind of longer fingers. So, obviously it's just a little harder to pull my finger all the way back. When I keep my fingers all the way back like this, like I feel like it takes away the enjoyment. It takes away the enjoyment of using my knife when I have to think that hard about it, when there's so many other ones that I can just pull out of my pocket and boom, knock the blade out. And even if I'm not fidgeting with it, even if it's just the enjoyment of deploying it that one time like this, like that's what I want. And for $272, that's what I need. That's my problem here. This is a phenomenal design with awesome materials. It's super light. It carries great. It feels really good in the hand. There's no ergonomical issues whatsoever, but the super touchy lock bar really ruins it for me. I'm not saying don't buy this knife, because I really do like a lot of things about this knife. I'm just saying know what you're getting into. So for me, having that big issue with the lock bar makes it very hard to justify $272 on this knife. If there was no lock bar issue, or let's say, for example, this was an inset liner lock, which it really could have been. I mean, you could have another carbon fiber scale on this side with an inset liner lock, and it would have done the job just fine, and you wouldn't have that issue. And then I probably would have been like all about spending $272 on it, especially with it, being American made. And I think that's what's really important to touch on here is, I think one thing within the community that everyone will agree with me on is if it's made in America and it's done right, and you don't have issues like a heavy lock bar pressure, like, people are okay to spend $272 on a knife. Some people, not most people, not everybody, but there's a good chunk of people out there to keep these knife companies making these premium knives at that price that are going to buy them all day. But they got to be done right. You can't. The super touchy lock bar is a real big miss on this, in my opinion. As many nice things as I have to say about it, for me, for what I look for when I buy a knife, especially knowing what is out there and what's available on the market today, that super touchy lock bar really plays a huge factor for me, and it's why I personally would probably not buy this knife. I would definitely say check it out and see how it feels for you. If you're okay with kind of, making sure and being very aware that your fingers are always far back on the knife, because keep in mind, this is like not half of the handle, but it's every bit, if not more than 2/3 of the handle here that you have to, or 1/3 of the handle that you have to completely avoid. So this 2/3 to maybe even like, I don't know, maybe just like 5/8 of the handle that you have to keep your fingers on and not touch that lock bar. If you can do that, I would say check it out. I really like everything else about this knife, but just a really big issue there for the lock bar. And again, we'll just put just a little pressure right there, and that actually kind of worked. So yeah, it's something that there. So this is like the regular, and that is just like absolute murder on my index finger. So Yeah, that's it, guys. A lot of good things right here, but there's one real big miss. So let me know what you think of this. Let me know what you think of the design aspect and like all the things that I like about the knife. But then also let me know how big of a deal that is for you with the pressure on the lock bar, because, you know, I want to get back on the ZT train. I really, really do, because I still like them, but they can't have these misses. Can't have these kind of misses. This one, I would probably have to pass on personally, but let me know what you guys think of it. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.